All right, guys. Zoom tells us we are live, so it must be true. It is Tuesday night. It's 7 o'clock Central. And I hope you recognize this fine gentleman sitting over here with me as my guest, coming out of Illinois. Now he lives up in the balmy state of Minnesota. Dave Wurm. How are you doing tonight, bud?
Bernie, I'm doing great. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I am very pleased that you're here and that you're not where you used to be back in the day. And with me being on the scout team and you having the ability to get a good lick in every once in a while, I'm glad we're about 1,200, 1,500 miles apart right now.
There were never serious hits, so there was always friendly slaps just to let you know we're there, Bernie. But
That's right. That's right. Got it. That's exactly right. Guys, number 97 came out of Illinois, and there's all kind of great stuff that I've learned about you, Dave, doing some research. You're in, is it your city's Sports Hall of Fame?
Yes.
Your hometown?
Elgin, Illinois, yeah.
Well, and I had Daryl Holt on a few weeks ago, the Gallatin High School Sports Hall of Fame. So I've got all kind of dignitaries showing up for conversations with Commodores. But let's talk about growing up in Illinois. What you were in the heart of wrestling country, the heart of Big Ten basketball and football. How did you escape out of Illinois and make your way to Nashville back in the early 80s?
You know, it was in the end, Bernie, it had come down to Iowa and Vanderbilt, and it was really, really tight. And I knew that for the measure of my life, going to Vanderbilt was the best long-term decision. Mm-hmm. And I can look back now and say one of the top three most important decisions I made. And while it meant for some sad Saturdays, there were some mighty fine ones too, and some friends for lifetimes.
You know, you're so right, Dave. That's one of the reasons why I started doing this show a couple of years ago, is being a teammate, regardless if it's middle school, high school, pros, college. It takes you back to a time and place that I bet if you're sitting with Snyder and some of your other buddies from that time period, you could say one person's name or an event or Jonesy's or whatever it may be. And not only is it going to bring an immediate smile to your face, but there'll be 10 minutes of half truths shared about the events you all shared. Am I right about that?
That is totally accurate. You know, when you've been through that kind of grind, you're just connected, really almost like at the molecular level. You're kindred spirits, and countless years go by and you run into folks 20, 30. I saw Mike McDonald at homecoming this past year. I hadn't seen Mike in 30 years. And once I recalibrated on what each other looked like, you know, it's like we just caught right up where we left off. It's amazing.
Well, here's two names I got for you. Dwayne Jones says, "What's up, Captain? How are you doing?"
Nice, Dwayne. Hey, bud.
And when I say Doug Bradley, what is the first thing you think?
Omar. The lightest nose tackle in the history of the SEC football.
And maybe one of the fastest. That's
absolutely. You got to have something there, and he sure had that.
All right, we got another one coming out of Chicago. They're starting to roll in here for you, Dave. Dino, John Denardi is in the house with us.
John, how you doing, bud?
And guys, of course, I've got Dave Wurm, captain, number 97, and we're just talking about how he got down to Nashville. You're choosing between Iowa, which was a lot closer to home, I assume, had a lot of different things to offer. Plus, it's not the SEC. It's Big Ten. It's a whole different caliber of the game, as we like to say in the SEC. But what was it about maybe your recruiting visit? What was it that you learned about Vanderbilt before you signed on the dotted line?
Well, there were really two things. The athletic facilities, you know, while not stellar, were pretty darn nice at the time. The stadium was nice. It just kind of felt like home to me. But the emphasis on academics and, you know, the integrity of the institution, there was really strong connectivity between the faculty and that whole process at that time. And so I was really impressed. And, you know, Iowa is an awesome institution too, and no shade on them at all.
Yeah.
But their emphasis was all about your life as a football player. And I love football still to this day, love it. But you know, in your heart of hearts that no, there's going to be a life after football. And Vanderbilt did a great job of selling me on it. And everything they sold me on actually all came true. So I have zero complaints.
You know what's so great about that comment, Dave, is I can't tell you how many folks I have these conversations with on Tuesday nights, and they echo what you just said. They've gotten offers from bigger schools with more prestige or better pedigree on the field and better results, but not with the same results for the next 40 or 50 years. And speaking of someone who is aged gracefully, and Linda gave him the night off from the steak restaurant, Coach Shep, Gary Shepard is in the house with us.
Coach Sheppy, how are you?
Oh, Dave, we got more folks. We got Gerald Collins, maybe one of the hardest hitters. You were gone by the time I think Gerald came through, but ooh, he could hit. And I didn't have the pleasure of playing with OJ Fleming, but he's turned out to be a good buddy and a true Commodore. That's for sure. You guys, we're talking with Dave Wurm coming out of Minnesota. Now, I'm not going to try to skip around a lot on you, Dave, but once you got to Vanderbilt, was it what you thought? Was it much more? Because you're coming out of, we're usually a big fish in a small pond in our hometowns. All state, we have all these recognitions. But then when we get to campus in August for fall camp, everybody in our class is that way. All the guys you're competing with have the same or similar accomplishments. What was that transition like for you?
What I remember so vividly about it, Bernie, and right from the first day, because the freshmen came early, the varsity came like 4 days later. Mm-hmm. And that first all-pad scrimmage, I'll never forget the moment you see that speed, and it's like, whoo. When you saw that rarely, maybe a high school all-star game or something, but to see it on every rep and every practice, that speed, it took a long time actually to adjust to that speed and just the overall athleticism of everybody.
Well, Dave, you had some all-stars on that offensive line you're competing against, guys who made it into the pros. What was it like going up against the tractor?
I remember very vividly my freshman year actually was UT week. Back then it was Thanksgiving and we were shut down.
Yeah.
And there was a trap play and Will smoked me so hard he separated my shoulder.
Oh my.
So I was out and it was like a 20-degree day too. It was just cold as heck. And Eric Snyder was my backup. They put him in on the very next play. They were in the exact same play and they blew out Eric's knee. And so I'm on the side, icing up my shoulder, and Eric's got ice bag on us. And Will comes over and goes, "Sorry, fellas." We're like, "You killed us, dude. You killed us."
But playing against such accomplished athletes can only make you better. And it just, every position, it didn't matter what our records were at the end of the seasons. We had skilled players at every position. They wouldn't be playing in the SEC otherwise. Right. But I've always thought what kind of separates the Vanderbilt player from the state school player, wherever they may be, is what's up here. Now, a lot of that sometimes could get in the way if your athleticism doesn't take over. Right. But playing the position that you were in, Dave, you're working in concert with the other guys on the defensive line. Talk for just a minute about that communication, either pre-snap or during a play, if there's any communication, because I want you to take us into that collision, into the trench, and just share a little bit about what your experience was on the D line.
Well, you get the call, and it's even more advanced now than it was, 37 years ago when I was playing, but you'd hear the whole call, and we did spend time as a defensive unit, so you understood kind of the role of that defense in the play, but you immediately shift to, what is your specific assignment and your line mates especially. There'd be some communication based on what we'd see in the stance or what some of the early reads would be. But it was always just boom, boom, boom. We'd kind of talk afterwards and recalibrate and give some feedback in, but the intensity was so high. There weren't really a lot of words. It was a super intense focus and maximum exertion, and a lot of grunting.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that I learned along the way, of course, I didn't play your position, but I'm completely opposite of you. I'm watching what's in front of me, that I know with certain defensive calls, the D lineman's responsibility may not necessarily to be focused on making the tackle, but rather occupying one or two of the offensive linemen so that the next line behind you can come in and make those tackles. Is that a fair assessment on certain defensive alignments and schemes?
Oh, absolutely. And my senior year, we had the great Chris Gaines running behind us. And so easily half of our schemes were designed to occupy space and blockers because Chris was so great at covering the range from sideline to sideline that
Yeah.
keeping him free was our best opportunity to have a success on that play. And it was a lot by design. And the fact is we were pretty good at it, and Chris was fantastic at it.
Well, how about the Tulane game when he had 37 tackles at the Superdome? I mean, I don't know if that's ever been accomplished. Certainly not Vanderbilt. Maybe not the SC. I don't know what the records are, but my gosh, I'll put that game up against anybody's defensive game.
Yeah, somebody asked me about that because they're looking at some stats over the holidays, and I wanted to say we ran 42 defensive plays that game, but that would have been a little bit less than a half truth, Bernie.
Wow. Guys, I'm talking with Dave Wurm. We're in the mid 80s. And now I want to talk a little bit about two of your favorite non-athletes or former athletes. I don't know if Wig was an athlete, he was a runner, but I want to talk about Coach Bates. I want to talk about John Norwig and their influence on you and the brethren that made up the team, because to me, those guys had enormous influence. They were, I cannot speak high enough about those two men.
They were extraordinary, really. And, I didn't have any major injuries, but I got banged up a lot. Mm-hmm. And those two worked as a team. And on one hand, kind of getting you back and ready to go, Norg was just super skilled. And I'll tell you, I kept getting banged up after ball. Mm-hmm. And what I missed most about life after ball was having a Norwig around to heal you in 3 days to get him out there and go again. Yeah. And the years don't help at all either. But then he and Brad would work in tandem. And so Brad would work on the conditioning or the physical aspect of that to put you in a better position to not redo the injury. But they were really, really skilled, and they had an amazing sense of humor. And there was one case, and somebody actually gave me the flyer. Bates had put together the Town Crier summer newsletter. Uh-huh. And I got banged up a lot. So I spent a lot of time with Norwig. And so the whole damn flyer was Bates had drawn this cartoon of me attached to the training room with an umbilical cord. And some dude had that. I saw this after 25 years or so, and I just laughed my butt off. They were just a great pair. Well,
I've posted one or two of those flyers in our group. I'm going to have to go back and find it, and I'll send it to you if it's one of yours. But, one of the great things about Norwig was he was always so complimentary, so nice to everyone. He didn't want to step on toes. He didn't want to bruise egos. And of course, if any of you guys knew Norwig, it was the complete opposite. He would call you whatever was on his mind and wasn't able to, thankfully, there were no cell phones to record some of those conversations.
He was good. And he the best thing about Wig is he dished it, but then he could take it if it was a good one.
Oh yeah.
And early upon his arrival, and he was falling in love with who is now and still his wife. He was kind of in a lackadaisical jog around the block that McGugan ran on, and he ran into one of the guy wires. Oh. And he cut his chin, and he still has to this day a jagged scar on this. And we gave him so much grief because it was like a 10 or 12 stitcher deal. It was a good G.I. Joe scar, and he got it by not paying attention, just doing his little run around campus.
Well, he, from his, I don't know if it's coaching tree, trainer tree, Fed was with the Seahawks and then with Iowa for many, many years. You had Tim Bream, who was with the Bears for many, many years. So that core group, when we were there, really have gone on to do some pretty outstanding things, particularly in the next levels. But Dave, let's talk a little bit about Coach Bates. Rose Bowl, 3-time, he's got all these accolades, but no one, to me, there was no finer athlete, physical conditioning wise, than Coach Bates. You might have had some better, faster runners, maybe somebody who could run a little bit further, but not collectively. He was just an incredible specimen.
That's exactly the word I was thinking about, specimen. Yeah. And, I thought he taught us some really important things. And really, when you look at how athletes train today, Brad was on the cutting edge of a number of things. And that was exceptional then, and it's standard now. And so he brought some really good science to what we were doing, but he lived that science. And, we would do conditioning after 2 or 3 days, and then Brad would go for his run in the track adjacent to the field. And I could remember watching him run. It's like, that guy is like lightning still. It was amazing.
Yeah. Now, did you participate in the St. Valentine's Day Massacre? Were you still?
No, that was the year after I was gone. And
you just missed it. You just missed it. And Dwayne, I'm sure, is going to comment that he never put his foot on the brake or pulled the parking brake as we're trying to push the sedan up the the multi-story parking deck. What about Dave? What about I know he took a group to Cincinnati for I don't know if it was the world rowing competition, whatever it was Fred Peterson and a whole bunch of linemen on both sides of the ball went up to Cincinnati for that.
I did not make that trip because I got to summer training shortly after that started.
Mm-hmm.
But man, I remember the guys had trained so hard for that, and they could row for frickin' ever. It was amazing. It was kind of cool they did that.
I still am not a fan of rowing machines, but I do know the benefits of them. Speaking of number 79, hailing out of the Chicago area, Smitty, Greg Smith has just joined us.
Smitty.
Hey, Greg, thank you for joining us, bud. And I'm going to get you on this show with Fouts and Fish sometime soon. Could you imagine that trio being on here? That'd be a lot of fun. Yeah. Dave, you were an economics major, and that's what you got your degree in. How much of your high school academics prepare you for Vanderbilt, or was there a big transition your freshman year and you finally just got the hang of it?
I went to a Catholic high school, and the curriculum was really vigorous in the Chicago suburbs. And so the intensity of the coursework wasn't a giant leap, but the pace of it was actually. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I remember freshman year battling through, and I think I ended up with a C+ that first semester. And while I was disappointed because I didn't get that any of my high school years, pulling that off while this was pre-rolls on how much time you could spend playing football, I was relieved and excited at the same time.
Well, that was, you're talking about time management that we all have to learn, no matter what your high school was like, unless you were maybe Todd Marinovich, where your dad had just had you on this regimen. Learning time management when you're living on your own, I think, is one of the biggest obstacles, biggest hurdles for any college student, regardless if you're playing a sport or not. But one guy I know who mastered it very quickly, David Kropp, has just joined us. Hey, David, good to see you, bud.
Hey, David.
David, let's talk a little bit about classwork versus your obligations with football. Most of our practices, they tried to work with us. You had a lab, and you couldn't move it around and those kind of things. Did you have conflicts that you had to deal with a professor or your coach that you had to deal with and try and figure those things out?
That actually only happened twice. One under Coach Mack, Coach McIntyre was there my first 2 years, and Coach Brown the next two. One with each, and I was kind of jammed up and had to get some special attention to kind of get through it, and they were very accommodating, and you just felt bad missing something on behalf of your commitment to the team. But if you didn't make it through it, you'd be no use to the team because you wouldn't be there. So they were always very good about that.
That is absolutely true. Who recruited you? Which coach under Coach Mack's staff was assigned to you?
Gene Wyndham.
Coach Wyndham is very active in our group. He may be watching us tonight, I'm not sure. But another Commodore, Wilbert Pryor, affectionately known as Chicken Wayne, man who gets around. He is spotted with all the celebrities all over the place. But Will, thanks for joining us tonight. Dave, the statute of limitations, I'm told, in Tennessee are up. There's no extradition between Minnesota and Tennessee, so you can let fly how your recruiting visit went. Who were your hosts?
Ken Brokaw was my host, actually, and he actually came up in conversation. I was texting with Daryl and Gromos and Snyder a few weeks ago because they had shared that Bill Fletcher had died.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I remember very vividly meeting Bill with my host, Ken Brokaw. Ken was a gentle giant and fun dude from Chicago, liked to have a great time. And he could get us into any place that we weren't supposed to be in. And he took me to all of those.
Nice.
And he very slickly and slyly would drop us off at the hotel about 11:30, so we'd be in. And anything we did after that was on our nickel and not his. And he was a great host.
Very good. Well, I know that Snyder and a lot of the guys on the D line, and maybe a good chunk of the Chicago area guys were some of your running around buddies. But my question to you is, where were some of the favorite places when you weren't having to deal with economics or football? I know Jonesy's, I know Banditos, I know there were places all over, but did you have a particular place or two you guys like to go and just have some downtime?
You named them. And so early days, it was Jonesy's for sure. And the precursor to Banditos there was, it was not Subway, it was Subbase or something was right over there.
Yeah, I forget. Dwayne, I know you know the name of that, across the street from the tower. Rest in peace. The towers are no longer.
That's right.
And Banditos is, of course, long gone. But anytime I went over to Banditos, you were guaranteed to see half a dozen to 25 athletes over there. And I don't remember the proprietors' names, but I know they love sports and love having athletes around.
And I can't remember either, but they were super supportive. Anytime we needed to earn a few bucks, they'd put us to work. And
yeah,
they were just really good supporters.
Dwayne said it's called the Substation.
There you go.
For Banditos.
$3.75 pitchers.
How many burgers and beers did you have at Rotier's? Or did you ever head out to Exit In, not too far away?
Plenty of times, and a lot of those tasty burgers. But it was always a trade-off between, do I want to eat burgers or do I want to drink beer? And so it was always a fine balance you had to strike.
All right, Doug is asking the question. Omar says, who's the Tower 2 sniper?
Oh, I don't know who that is. Who is that?
I don't know. Maybe he'll give us another comment, Doug. Maybe I just missed reading something. But TP number 8 coming out of Florida, Tony Piercy joined the conversation. Guys, I'm talking with David Wurm, number 97, who was a captain in 87, and I'm so glad to catch up with him tonight. Dave, let's go on the field a little bit. I know we don't talk much about games. We don't talk much about scores and things, but you played against, or we played during that time period where anytime you play in the SEC, you're playing against Sunday players. And I know there's got to be some memorable offensive players you were going up against, because gosh, it seemed like every week in the SEC they're just loaded that way and always have been. Any memorable games, players, teams, locations, stadiums?
Well, there's really 2 games that pop out, and it was kind of the beginning and the end. And so freshman year, and it is still, unfortunately, the last time that Vanderbilt beat Alabama.
Yeah.
And in Tuscaloosa at homecoming, and it was kind of a rout. And that one is still a very, very vivid memory. I had the chance this past fall with Eric Snyder and his 2 sons and mine. We did a father-son trip and went down to Tuscaloosa to watch Arkansas play this fall. And that's the first time we had been back there together, and just to see it now and still remember so clearly what that stadium looked like at the time. It's just mind-blowing.
Oh, it's 40,000 more seats. It's a complete different atmosphere. There's 150,000 people on campus for any SEC game. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Very, very corporate like. It's almost too big.
For sure. And that's the first one. And the last one is the last one, unfortunately. And senior year, giving up that big lead in Knoxville and losing to UT.
Yeah.
I still, and it's 35 years, I still have nightmares about that.
Wow. Because I didn't appreciate that was, your senior year. We were up 28-3, I believe, at half and lost 38-36. But I will always remember Billy Cunningham picking off Francis, because that was the exact play we had worked on in practice that week, and Billy was ready. But the onslaught, I mean, I can remember we had to wear our helmets going into the clubhouse or into the locker room at halftime, because they were throwing everything that wasn't nailed down just because of how bad the score was. Dwayne wants me to ask you about your battles against Kevin Brothen in practice.
Oh, God. Yeah, Kevin actually, because he and I became buddies, because every time I would drive back to Chicago, he would often hop in the car with me and I'd drop him off. But, he was young and smaller Kevin Brothen, but just freaky strong and just freaky quick, and going up against Brothen. And then Thor was also one of the antagonists, and just super, super good centers, and really quick with their hands. And once they got a hold of you, man, you had to fight hard. They were great.
Well, Thor had that wrestling background, so he had great feet. He had good technique, and you're right. Brothen was just he was man strong. Yeah, he really, even the small version of Kevin was man strong. That's
what I loved about Thor is that literally after every play, he just kind of look at you and smile and walk back to the huddle. It was just that big Thor grin, and just every play, you couldn't help but be happy being out there.
I got news for you. 30 years later, Not much has changed with
That's awesome.
when he and I get together every once in a while, and I'll see him, and that's just his disposition. You're right. He enjoys life. Dave, let's talk a little bit about life after Vanderbilt. You graduate in the spring of 88, I believe. And at that point, I'm assuming you didn't think that there'd be any more football for you. So it's time to go into your professional career. What was, anytime you get out of I'll call it the cocoon of being an undergraduate, where it's kind of, you learn your safe space, so to speak, and you know everybody and you develop a routine, but then you graduate. And if you don't go on to graduate school or have say a family business to immediately go into, you're having to make your way. What was your journey? What was going on for you as a newly minted graduate in 88?
I had one extra semester I had to get through, so I went on through the fall. And so I had done an internship with Procter and Gamble in that tweener summer. And I learned two things in that internship. I did not want to work for Procter and Gamble, but I love the grocery business. And so that fall, General Mills was on campus recruiting. And it literally came down to the wire where class was going to be done in a month. And I hadn't yet landed a job. So I was kind of nervous. Mm-hmm. And, this is before cell phones or emails or anything, Codaphones with the little tape deal. I'll never forget, I had the call that I had gotten the job. And I was so excited because one of the big things I was concerned about was, so how do I redirect the competitive spirit? Yeah. And General Mills the nickname at that time was the company of champions, and number one or number two in every category that we competed in, and operate as a team committed to winning together. And so I was super fortunate in that I found really quickly a way to redirect my competitive drive and intensity into a business atmosphere in sales where that was rewarded, and I was able to accelerate. But it's the things that I learned in the journey as an athlete and finding the way to make them translate into the business world.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that response about your experience, because that's one of the things I wanted to get into was lessons learned. But Dave, you go from playing sports probably since you were a little dude, and for the next 15 years or so, high school, then through college, you're kind of regimented. You got to get your books in, you got to get your rest, lifting, practice, and it's rinse and repeat every week during the season. Now, during the off season, you got workouts, but you can let your hair down a little bit. But then when that Tennessee game ended in the fall of 87, you're no longer a college athlete. You're no longer a competitive athlete playing a sport. You did find it several months later, you said, when you landed your first job. But I remember my final spring before I graduated, not having practices or meetings or anything. I didn't know what to do with myself. It was hard to fill that time for a little bit. I found good stuff to do. But how did you come back down into being what I'll call a civilian and no longer, having to do all those obligations of college football?
Well, I did have one withdrawal symptom. And the withdrawal symptom was I had designed my schedule all 4 years so that right before we had to report to McGugin and right after lunch, I could have an hour nap.
Nice.
And that was burned into the system. So I'm working, and it's 1 o'clock after lunch, and I'm trying to stay awake in meetings or on sales calls. I'm like, oh man, I got to shake this thing. And that actually took me quite some time to shake.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Go ahead.
All I was going to say is I don't think that people appreciate how important naps are to a college athlete, regardless of your sport. If you got to get a snoozer in for a few minutes, man, you'll find a place. You could be standing up,
totally,
wherever it may be. But that's so important. Go ahead, Dave. Sorry.
But then it was really all about that discipline, the grind. When the time got freed up, it's just like, holy cow.
Yeah.
Now I had more fun, and there was more day-to-day kind of joy, but it was a bunch of time that I never had access to, that I was able to pour into my work and my wife and my partnerships, and everything it was actually a bonus.
It's like you get part of your life back. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but from 4 to 7 p.m. every day, I got to fill that time. Normally I'm over at Magoogan doing my thing. Want to welcome, we got a couple more rolled in. Greg Simmons has rolled in. John Griffith. Thank you, fellas, for coming on board with Dave Wurm tonight. Dave, let's talk about the working world. Did you pretty quickly become regimented? Because I know we talked about being trained as an athlete. You've got to get stuff done, and you were able to start applying that. But not everybody on your sales force or in your team or in your group, whatever it's called, comes from that kind of background. They may be more academic oriented. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up, but they may not necessarily be team oriented. Right. How tough was that transition, or was it tough for you?
It wasn't tough because everybody had the same kind of mindset. What was tough, though, was when you could call upon specific experiences so that you were conditioned for a moment, and they didn't have that. And actually, I had this talk with my team about 3 months ago, and a year and 3 quarters into the pandemic, and all hell is breaking loose. The supply chains aren't working. It's just bonkers. And the team was getting really rattled. And someone had asked me, so how do you just pivot like you do? And I explained to them, and Sheppy will remember this, the drill that we used to do in the run-ups to game time, the sudden change. And the offense has a turnover, and you may have been out there for 12 snaps on a super long series and either kept them out of the end zone, they got in, and we turned the ball over in 3 plays, and you got to be out there and ready to go. And so when that gets drilled into you and you get change thrown at you, no one's trying to rip your head off. It's actually comparatively pretty easy. And so, but if you haven't had that kind of experience and really training and consistency with having to overcome in that intensity at the drop of a hat, it's difficult to explain. So I tell them stories, and smart people are always trying to learn, and so they kind of get the story, but they'd never actually walked in those shoes. They got to kind of experience it for the first time.
Yeah, there's only so much you can share for them to experience. You're right. Dave, do you watch the college game these days? Do you watch the pro game?
I do. I love football, and I will always love football.
Tell me, what is it about the college game right now? We're 30 years beyond when we played. It's bigger, faster, stronger. And what you see in the high school level right now, colleges were doing 15 years ago. What you're seeing in colleges, the pros were doing it all. It all trickles down. But what is it about the current game that brings you joy?
The speed and athleticism and the size. And just to see, because I'm still an SEC guy, I watch every game I can, just to see from top to bottom, just the quality of the athletes now, and what was exceptional size back when I played is now at most standard, but kind of the minimum, really. It blows my mind.
When you see some offense and defensive lines in the SEC are larger than some of the pro offense and defensive lines, that's just remarkable to me.
Yeah, it is.
And the athleticism, the feet, the hands of these linemen truly are just amazing now. I'm not saying that you guys back then didn't have your own set of skills that were exceptional, but it just seems, it doesn't matter the position. It just seems like it's all so much more advanced than it ever was.
It is, and especially the line play, both offensive and defensive linemen. If you watch those men do this, they're martial artists. And it really is the level of complexity and technique in the hand fighting in particular is just amazing to me.
There was a lineman from Vanderbilt, Bruno Reagan. He's now on a local radio and social media in Nashville, but he's a martial artist. And he was on the show this over a year ago, but he talks about how he took that training as a kid and was able to incorporate his feet and his hands and his body leverage when dealing with on the line in the trench. And I can only imagine how beneficial that would be to linemen and maybe even linebackers and ends these days. But you're right, the athleticism is just incredible.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Do you attend games? Do you get to travel outside of Minnesota? Does work
No,
allowed?
I get out to, I try to get to Vanderbilt game every fall. The pandemic took us off a couple of years ago, but I was back there this past fall. And then as I mentioned, Eric and I and our boys, we decided we would start having a father-son tradition of an SEC game every year together. So it was Alabama and Arkansas and Tuscaloosa this past fall, and we're already set and booked for Alabama at Ole Miss this next fall.
Oh, the Grove. Excellent. Excellent. Now you are a grandfather. Let's talk about that for a little bit.
Oh my gosh.
How many are there and what are their ages and how often do you get to see them?
It's amazing. It is utterly amazing. And so there's three. Our oldest, Rebecca, and her husband, Blake, had identical twin boys who just turned 3 here back in November.
And are you working on their hands and feet work yet? Or are you giving them a
Well,
little bit of time?
they're amazing, Bernie. I'll tell you, because they were 3 months premature. And so they spent three full months in the NICU. But they come from good stock, and so you'd never know looking at those boys now that they were 3 months premature because they're huge and they are athletic, and so
nice.
They are going to be awesome. And then they have baby sister Nora, who turned 1 here this past month, and she's the stoic, and it's very clear that she'll be running that house here in this short period of time. But they are just a fantastic joy.
If she isn't already running it.
They're just a joy.
Oh, that's so great. Guys, I'm talking with Dave Wurm, number 97. He was a captain in 87 and played 4 years under Coach Mack and Coach Brown. I want to talk, we've got a few more minutes, Dave, and I appreciate your time tonight. I want to talk a little bit about the coaches. Coach Mack and Coach Brown, very different personalities, very different backgrounds, but you were one of the players who got to play under both coaches. Share a little bit about Coach Mack, and then we'll turn it to Coach Brown for a couple of minutes.
You know, they were both great coaches, but as you said, Bernie, in such different ways. And Coach Mack was a gentleman first and foremost, and just a man of super high integrity. And it literally oozed out of everything that he did. It's one of the things I remember most about him. But more of a general manager. And, you know, the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball ran their deal, and he operated as a general manager. Watson, as we all know, was an offensive genius. And so he was very, very hands-on there. And certainly involved in the game management on the defense, but the defensive side of the ball kind of ran as their own thing. And so it was a different head coaching experience because Coach Brown was always so focused on the offense and not a lot of engagement on the defensive side of the ball. But Coach Mack was present across the field all the time.
Yeah, it was. I didn't play for Coach Mack. I only played for Coach Brown, but I certainly knew of Coach Mack and his fine reputation. Now we've got to spend a couple of minutes talking about Linda's husband, Gary Shepard. You got to play for him for a few years. And Coach Shep, if anything, was one of the more enthusiastic coaches I'd ever been around. He didn't coach me, but everybody knew him and most tolerant. No, everybody loved him. But what was it like playing for Coach Shepard?
Well, Coach Shepard was a little bit crazy. But
don't you have to be if you're going to coach the D line?
You got to be. But he was kind of the first coach, and I kind of felt like a trendsetter, really, in that he developed relationships with us. You know, we weren't just players. You know, we were humans that he took the time to get to know, and I love that about him. And it was always very relatable all the time. And I'll share it now, and he probably knows I'm going to tell this story. But one of my absolute favorite moments was senior year we were doing triples, so we would do conditioning in the morning, and it was particularly hot that summer. And I had cramps and had fallen out once, and Sheppy was just all over our butts. And the moment it would get hot, he always wore this silly ass blue sweatsuit that would get him going, and he would take the time. And Sheppy, you remember doing this, and you would drain the water out of your sleeve of that, and you go, "Boys, I'm doing just fine." Well, one day, after just riding our butts for needing too much water and complaining about hot, he fell over, and Sheppy got heat exhaustion.
Oh my!
And he literally dropped, and he was kind of twitching on the field. And there was about 10 seconds where we looked at him and like, "You lay there for a while, dude. You were this one." And after that moment, Coach Shepard became the most generous human being with water. He was like Poseidon. Boys, get some water, get some water. It was awesome.
You know, funny, he didn't bring that story up when he was on the show a few weeks
I'm
ago. It humanized him pretty quickly, I bet.
Great guy. And actually having his sons around too was awesome. So it's kind of cool to see how the family restaurant has grown up and how they've all been involved. Just a great family.
Yeah, and guys, for those of you who hadn't seen some of my posts, I'm trying to organize the April 1st, 2nd, and 3rd weekend. We play Tennessee at home. I'm trying to get tickets. If you're interested in going to the games, send me a message. Tickets are very hard to come by, but we're trying to put them together with the ticket office. And that Saturday, we're going to try to run up to Clarksville to have an early dinner with Coach before the 7 p.m. first pitch that Saturday night, the 2nd. Dave, we got just 1 or 2 more minutes, and I want to talk about what's it meant to you over the years, and maybe it's changed in your mind. It certainly has from my experience of being a Vanderbilt graduate, getting back into the real world, dealing with family and friends and colleagues, et cetera. What has that meant to you being a Vanderbilt graduate over the time period?
It's like being anchored in bedrock, really, in just the most powerful way. Because, you know, Vanderbilt as an institution has a tremendous pedigree and prestige. And then being able to say on top of that, that I was a student athlete and played football at Vanderbilt, and people who know appreciate what was required to do that and the nature of that grind.
Yeah.
And it's a great experience, and it's wired throughout me, but it has carried forward into everything I've done throughout life because of the experience and all that it's taught me and the relationships that I've came from that. It's meant everything to me.
You know, you mentioned it earlier. Back then, when we were playing, there wasn't the 20 hours a week rule.
Right.
And it could be 40, 50, or 60 hours a week during the fall, depending on the week. And it really is, it's not for the faint of heart, and it's certainly for the young to be able to go that long every week. And you had to get those cat naps in, like you mentioned, after lunch. That was key, because if you didn't, man, you were hurting. Because if you're up 1, 2 o'clock in the morning trying to study or write that paper, it really does prepare you, doesn't it?
It does. It is a grind of a different nature, and military is another level altogether.
Mm-hmm.
But the life of a college athlete like that, particularly in that time, because of the unique nature of that grind, if you can survive that and find a way to thrive, you have everything you need to be successful in life.
Well, Dave, I want to thank you again for sharing a little bit of your story and your time tonight. I really appreciated getting to catch up with you after all these years. So thank you.
It was my pleasure, Bernie. Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Absolutely. And guys, that's why I do these conversations. They're with former teammates, old Commodores, young Commodores. It doesn't matter when you played or what position or how much time you got on the field. I want to talk with you. We're trying to share or create the oral history of our program. And we've been blessed. I've been blessed to have conversations with Commodores from the 50s all the way up to 2 years ago on the team, and everybody in between. We're fast approaching 100 conversations. So we're going to keep doing this. You guys keep coming back on Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock. Please continue to be safe for you and your families. And remember, anchor down. Have a good night.